It's been one of the great pleasures of having this job is being able to work with Brooke. There's not a day that goes by that we don't talk on the phone, and we've developed not only into a great professional partnership, but a very, very close and warm friendship. And I also, I've worked with agricultural secretaries for the past 40 years, and I can tell you this is the best USDA secretary that we've had in American history. And last month, Brooke and I released the new dietary guidelines. You can see the food pyramid here. For the first time in our nation's history, the federal government put real food at the center of the American diet and protein in the center of the American plate. For decades, Washington lied to Americans. They told us that real food was no better than ultra-processed food. That claim defied science, it ignored common sense, and it betrayed American families. It justified hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies for ultra-processed products, fueled by nationwide health collapse that drove trillions of dollars in healthcare costs that now threaten our economy and our future and make our children the sickest generation in our nation's history and the sickest children in the world, the highest chronic disease burden of any children in the world. Today, more than 40% of American children suffer from at least one chronic condition. Nearly 1 in 5 teenagers suffers from fatty liver disease. We've watched captive agencies and corrupt officials and industry officials gaslight Americans into looking at chronic disease as just a normal feature of childhood. Previous dietary guidelines downplayed the dangers of added sugar, so much so that federal school lunch standards allowed unlimited sugar in meals served to young children. That was a failure of leadership. Parents saw the damage in their own homes, physicians saw it in the exam rooms, and we all saw it in the National Bill for Health Care. We now see the consequences everywhere: rising rates of obesity, diabetes, metabolic disease in our children. 6 in 10 American adults now live with at least one chronic disease. 4 in 10 live with 2 or more. This is not a small crisis. This is the defining health crisis of our time. Every parent in this country knows that something is wrong with the American diet. Now, for the first time in a generation, you have leaders in Washington who are willing to confront the truth and to change course. And that change started because of President Donald Trump, because he had the courage to take on the big food industry and challenge the status quo and put the health of American families and American children first. He refused to accept the system that made our kids sick and called it normal. He told us to fix it, and we are now fixing it. That is leadership. These dietary guidelines rest on gold standard science, real-world evidence, and they have earned broad support across medicine and public health and American culture. And I'm so proud today to work with organizations like the American Medical Association. I want to thank Bobby Mukamala for his courage and his vision and his commitment to public health and to reversing the chronic disease epidemic and refocusing the American diet on real food. Today, we are putting the full weight of the federal government behind one goal: making healthy, affordable food accessible to every American. Secretary Brooke Rollins is leading an historic transformation at USDA. And together, we're redirecting government procurement dollars toward American farmers and not junk food manufacturers. When large corporations that make ultra-processed food control the food system in our country, it's bad for farmers because it takes power away from them, from farmers, from ranchers, and from local producers, and it concentrates it in the hands of people who are not looking out for American health. You can see that commitment in our speakers today. We're reforming the system across our military, our schools, our hospitals, and our prisons. Brooke has a $405 million a day actually spending on subsidizing food in this country for the WICS program, for school lunches, for food stamps, for the Indian Health Program, for the SNAP program. And then we have military and prisons and VA all paying for millions of foods a day. These guidelines are going to drive cultural changes in the American diet. First, starting with those subsidized food programs and making food more available and affordable to every American. And yesterday I met with many of the prison leaders in this country. We're talking about changing the food in the prisons for public safety reasons. Because we know in their study after study, and you can go on Google and look them up, and show when they change the food to real food in prisons, and the violence goes down by 40 or 50%. Disciplinary problems drop by 40 or 50%. Use of restraints in juvenile detention facilities go down by 70%. Oh, this is a mental health issue as well as a behavioral issue, as well as a physical health issue. And yesterday, we also met with Chef Robert Irvine, who's a television chef who has been brought in by the Army and by the military, by our wonderful DOW Secretary Pete Hegseth, to change the military food program. And you heard a little bit about that from Michael Oberthal, the Undersecretary of the Army. But the talk we had with Irvine was extraordinary because he's able to bring, first of all, he did Fort Bragg and Fort Hood and Fort Jackson, two of the biggest bases in our country. They're now doing 20 more bases. And the food was so bad on these bases that the troops weren't eating it. 50% of it was being thrown out. And now there's lines around the block where people are fighting to get in. The troops were going and buying their meals from fast food joints and spending their hard-earned, meager military paycheck on fast food. And now they're fighting to get in to eat real food, and it's all fresh. There's no freezing. He told me that a fresh salmon costs $6 a fillet. A frozen salmon costs $9. Why are we buying this frozen salmon? The military, the cost of the military right now of feeding soldiers $18 a day. He's doing it for $10 a day and feeding them real food. What Robert Irvine says, we don't need more money. We just need to be smarter. And that's what this administration is about. Americans receive Americans are going to start receiving food that support public health rather than driving long-term illness. Over the past year, USDA has approved historic SNAP waivers, as Brooke mentioned, from almost 20 states to remove soda and junk food, and in some cases, ultra-processed food from taxpayer-funded benefits. More than 20 states have stepped forward. We're calling on every state to take this common sense action. The food industry is responding. Companies are stripping petroleum-based dyes out of their foods. Tyson's food, and there's no relation. Today is Tyson Day at HHS. Tyson's food stepped up early. CEO Donnie King, who's here today, because Tyson was the first large company to answer the call, removing petroleum-based dyes and committing to eliminate high fructose corn syrup from its branded foods. The FDA is establishing for the first time a clear definition of ultra-processed foods to guide labeling and federal purchasing decisions. And for the first time in decades, the FDA will require notification and safety review when companies introduce new chemicals into our food supply. Until now, the federal government lacked a real mechanism to track or evaluate many of the substances entering our food. We have 10,000 ingredients in our food in this country, and all but 400 are illegal in Europe. We are also partnering with innovators, designers, and advocates to deliver a clear, positive message. Healthy eating is achievable, practical, affordable, and within reach of every American family. In the months ahead, we will roll out a steady series of actions to reform procurement, to realign incentives, and to expand access to healthy, affordable whole foods nationwide. Let me be clear. Confronting ultra-processed food is not an attack on industry. It's an acknowledgement of a reality. The crisis is not the fault of individual Americans. Americans followed the guidance that they were given. Government policy pushed sugar, refined carbohydrates, and ultra-processed food, and the American people paid the price. HHS manages the largest budget in human history, and nearly 90% of it goes to treating largely preventable diet-induced chronic diseases. And the price is staggering. We spend more than $4 trillion a year on health care. 3/4 of that goes to chronic disease that are diet-induced. Getting that right is not optional. Our nation's future depends on it. Today, I extend my hand in good faith to anyone willing to put the health of our children above politics, improving school lunches, reforming SNAP, removing toxic additives. These were bipartisan priorities before, and we will make them bipartisan again. This movement will not slow down. We are restoring common sense. We are putting real food back at the center of the American diet, and together we're going to make America healthy again. And now I'm going to introduce the man you've all been waiting for, the undefeated heavyweight champion of the world, Mike Tyson, and 44 knockouts. And the thing I really love about Mike Tyson, though, is that he's a pigeon fancier. And I grew up breeding and racing Hungarian homing pigeons. And I started out when I was 7 years old. About 10 years ago, I went on Mike's podcast. And we were planning to talk about a wide range of things, but we spent almost the entire time talking about pigeons. So he was a pigeon racer, too. And in fact, he told me in that podcast, at the time, the first time that he realized that he had talent was when an older boy, a bully in the neighborhood, came by and killed one of his birds. And that was his first KO. But when he talked, this is the most fierce fighter in the ring in history. When he talks about pigeons, you can see his heart, his compassion, his gentleness. And you see in this ad, this extraordinary ad, and Peter Arnell and Brett Ratner told me that when they went to shoot this ad, they had 8 hours. They spent the first 7 trying to get Mike to read a script. And they weren't capturing the power that they knew was in him. So the last hour, they just let him talk. And out of that, we got this extraordinary, powerful ad. I think it's the most important and consequential ad in the history of the Super Bowl. And I think it's really going to change our country. So, Mike,